Welcome to Tradiers, the Trader's Edge. This is Jim Iuorio. That's Bob Iaccino. We are the hosts of the critically acclaimed Trader's Edge. That's what you're watching right now. How are you, Robert?
Good. I got to move my camera up a little.
Good. Is the coffee kicking in yet? You've started to
Yeah, I'm wired to the fucking tits.
We are ready to roll.
Ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. So stock market got an absolute caning today, down 60 when I left the trading floor. Anything to be concerned about, or is this just pre-election jitters?
You know, it's funny when I saw people saying that this is pre-election jitters. What do we got? 12 days, 13 days?
It is the election 23rd right here. We have 12 days. Yeah.
It seems awful early. I'm not one of those people afraid to say that I don't know why every risk asset went lower today.
Yeah.
I just think honestly, it's that everything was so high. This sounds stupid as well. This is when the knuckleheads on CNBC would say, well, this move is mostly technical because they don't know what it is, right? I just think, you know, the volume is decent in the stock market, and that can happen with stocks, right? Because as you get a move that gets larger and larger, there gets to be a little bit of nervousness. We had stocks at all-time highs, gold at all-time highs, and we have back-end yields slowly climbing, and we have the dollar continuing to get stronger. It's not a flight to safety because gold was lower and the yen was lower and the Swiss franc was lower. We got some sort of semi-bad news out of Japan, so that can explain the yen a little bit. I just think it's like things were high, and I think traders, investors taking a little bit of money off the table. It wouldn't surprise me to see this stuff bounce.
So where you guys were watching this, underscore what Bobby just said, by the way. We've been in markets for 38 years for me, 37 years for Bobby, over 70 between us. It is a chaos theory marketplace. There are lots of reasons that things go up and down. Sometimes things go down just because they're up a little too high. It's no problem to us. I think there is an element of taking some money off the table before the election because it is a binary event, but that's a small part of it. Anyway, I always intro it like this too. I say, you guys have been watching Bobby and I for a long time. You might think that we're full of shit. Maybe you think that answer was full of shit. But one thing you cannot deny is that we, along the way in our media careers, have made a lot of great contacts. Therefore, we have a lot of outstanding guests. We're going to bring on another one of those outstanding guests, our old friend, Dennis Kneale, who I knew back when we used to work for the TMZ of financial stations, CNBC. And now Dennis is going to come on and tell you what he's doing now. We're going to break down the elections and the risks. Dennis Kneale. Dennis Kneale, our old friend, how are you?
It's good to see you, and I am now the host of the What's Bugging Me podcast, which you have been kind enough to come on.
I love
to get you on there, and I'm hoping some people, maybe a few followers of my Twitter feed are following this live because they'll pick up some good information from you guys. You know, that intersection of the markets and the elections, a presidential election every 4 years, it's so fascinating and exciting, right? And of course, the economy wants to boom with every presidential election. You know, they're spending more ad money, and that makes the media feel better. So it's been awfully interesting to watch it. But I heard from a real political junkie today who said, my gosh, he said, I'm just so sick of it. I'm so ready for it to be over. How do you guys feel about that?
So I agree with you 100%. I want it to be over. Here's what I've been ruminating about, and perhaps you can shed a little light on this too, is that Kamala Harris, this is not like some sort of opinion. When she's been put up for votes in the past, she has not polled well. That's what, when she tried to run for president, she barely got anything. She is an unpopular candidate. She's viewed by the people as someone who doesn't know the issues without any depth. Her rise to success is somewhat unorthodox. Why the hell is she their candidate? I always picture the Democrats, and I'm a libertarian centrist. I always picture them as smarter and more conniving. From the moment they picked her, it's like, I don't know how this is going to work out. What is behind this?
Well, it's so bizarre, the whole thing. It's too late to even go back and fix any of it. Did you see on X this week video said to be from 2018, and the conservative Ben Sherman, who speaks really fast in a high-pitched voice so much it sounds like you're listening to him on twice as fast as usual. He in 2018 said, well, what they're going to do in 2020, the Democrats will probably say put someone like Biden in there, but they'll run someone like Kamala Harris with him, and then eventually he'll just get out of it and be a one-term president, and that's the way they will get her the nomination to run for president.
Why do they want her, Bobby? I know that's your question, but why do they want her?
Well, she's a black woman. That's the reason she's a DEI hire, right? I mean, that is the only reason. And I guess now with her being she has that incumbency. But also, no one thinks she's really the one who's going to be running the country. It's the people who are running the country right now behind Biden and behind Kamala. I mean, you know about this S&P predictor thing, right? That there's an 80% prediction rate accuracy. When the S&P is up, the incumbent party wins the election that year. You've seen that?
I know of it. Yeah.
And we're seeing a little bit of a dip in stocks today. So maybe, Jimmy, what we talked about earlier, maybe we were wrong. Maybe it's not election jitters. The fact of the matter, Dennis, is that the stocks perform well after presidential elections on balance, no matter what, for the most part. 3 and 6 months, you tend to be better. And, you think about things, we talk about price action and things like that. These kinds of things are logical. The incumbent is in because the populace is happy with the job, or somebody new gets in, bringing in hope of better economic outcomes. And both ways are predictive of a little bit stronger stock market short term. So either way, when somebody wins the election, usually the populace and investors, longer term investors, get a little bit more positive about equities.
Yeah. Well, they're happy to have the certainty, aren't they?
Yeah.
Think back, though, in January of 2021, with Biden taking over, wanting to raise taxes, wanting to spend like crazy, all of these bad habits and bad leanings, I thought markets are just not going to do well at all. The S&P 500 is up 32%, is it, in 3 years? The NASDAQ up 28% in those 3 years. Who would have ever thought that would happen that way? And yet it has. And that's because today the president matters less than ever. The markets doesn't, he or she, whereas what matters is the Fed, and that they're cutting rates as they've been started to cut now.
I think part of the reason that people want this to be over, and I'm on that same train. I'm just exhausted from all this. I mean, the minute I see a political ad, by the way, is anyone else sick of getting texts asking for $5 from anybody and everybody? It's driving me crazy.
That's I'm on the Act Blue list. Okay, I ended up on an Act Blue list, so I'm seeing the Democrats calling me by my first name: Kamala, Cory Booker, Tim Walz, all the people, the last people in the world I want to hear from, and they're acting like we're like this. Yeah, I actually
almost sent $5 to Trump because I got one from supposedly Don Jr. that said, "Please don't give my dad $5. I dare you. I don't even want you to." It was literally a text I got. Anyway, when you look at this election exhaustion, right? I personally, and I want you to agree, disagree, call me an idiot, whatever you think. I think markets specifically and the population in general is really tired of the sort of Hail Marys being thrown out there by the left of Hitler, dictator, all that kind of stuff. If the conversations were literally like, look, I'm going to try and push this policy. I don't know if I'll succeed. Try and get my party's Congress in so that I can succeed. I would actually think that this would be the outcome of that. And even if people didn't understand because the policy got too far in the weeds, I think people would welcome that. You guys agree? Think I'm nuts? What?
Well, I do think that people are so tired of just the bald-faced lies being told by the Democrats. It's the boy who cried wolf, right? They've been demonizing Trump now for 10 years. He's going to destroy democracy. He left office, man. He'd be only a one-term president. I mean, I just am shocked at this. But here's the difference this time around. What makes me hopeful? The X platform, as the freest media and free speech platform in the world. Last time around, last election, Twitter, under the old guard, was censoring the New York Post, 200-year-old newspaper, censoring their investigation on the Hunter laptop, deciding that, oh no, you haven't checked it enough. Okay, whereas that's never going to happen under Elon Musk. And so we had the Atlantic Monthly come out with this scandalous story that is so bad. And yet Nora O'Donnell on CBS News leads the evening news with this irresponsible report likening Trump to Hitler, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The difference now is that already on X, the families of the dead military person that Trump was said to said bad stuff about came out and said he was wonderful and this is bull. I mean, 2 witnesses that they cited said, no, that's not true.
Well, Dennis, can I stop you? the sister of the dead soldier, also said, this is bullshit, it's not true. And she said, I just voted for Trump today. I want that to be put in
Bingo.
there. Anyway, go on.
And look at how that never would have been out before. That never would have been happened. And yet instantly this Atlantic story and the media's coverage of it have been questioned and challenged like never before in a faster way and a wider way than ever before. Now, the problem, only 40 million Americans are on Twitter daily out of 330, 340 million people. But I think those 40 million are probably far more likely to vote than the average American, I'm guessing.
So one thing that I want people to know here too, because Bobby and I, on both of our platforms that we work on, we always talk about how we are kind of refugees from legacy media because we could not stand constant pressure from overzealous producers, constant pressure from sponsors. Dennis is with us too. We would all be in legacy media still if we could just keep our opinions to ourselves and our damn mouths shut. And guess what? We can't and will not. That's an accurate statement, correct?
Yeah, that's a very accurate statement. Elon Musk, I'm writing right now finishing up a bestseller on Elon Musk. It comes out in January. It's called The Leadership Genius of Elon Musk. And he has various lessons and that I offer, 11 lessons of Elon. And one lesson is this, that the most likely outcome, Elon says, is the most ironic one, the opposite of what you expect to occur. Well, I wanted to get hired again by the media after being at CNBC and Fox Business. And then for years, nothing. And finally decided to call them out. And I got my own podcast, by golly. But the result of this is the opposite of what I hope. I hope I build a big enough audience to where media come crawling back and want to hire me. Instead, I've told the truth about how lame they are, how crooked and biased they are. And so I'll never work for the media again, most likely. And that's the opposite outcome of what I might have intended or hoped to make happen.
I'm just reading a tweet now from a guy called PDB, at Real PDB123, his Twitter handle. He's got a huge following, like 213,000. And he said he just ran into a business associate in Manhattan. And the guy said, I'm voting for Kamala. And PD said, surely you must be joking. You're a diehard Trump guy. Last time we talked some years ago. And the guy said, not anymore. None of them matter. Whoever you vote for won't make a change, he yelled. But Trump would fix things in the short term. So I'm voting for Kamala. PD said, what? And he said, well, I want to bring about the destruction and downfall of America rapidly so we can see what's next, because it's going to happen anyway. How do you both of you guys feel about that?
Man, that is just awful and nihilistic, right? I mean, I always have wondered what that word means, but that is
what it means.
I'll rephrase it though in Elon Musk's view, because another thing he feels like is that the most likely outcome in life is often the most entertaining one, because all of life may just be a big video game, and you wouldn't make a video game that's boring. You make a video game with more interesting outcomes. And let's face it, for the next 4 years, it would be amazing to watch Donald Trump come back in there, knowing far more about what he's getting into and seeing what happens, a vastly more entertaining outcome than this fake, phony world of Kamala. I'm shocked that she's close in the election at all. I'm shocked that anyone would vote for her.
Yeah, well, me too. And to respond to that guy, I think he's an absolute dipshit. I think that we are on a path currently that leads us to a nasty destruction. But I think things could fall into place to take us off that path, which leads me in to the first thing I want to talk about, which is the debt bomb that could potentially be gathering steam, a fuse being lit that could happen sometime within the next 6-8 months. So both of these presidents seem like they're profligate spenders. Kamala Harris is absolutely a huge spender with a really high regulatory hurdle for businesses too. So perhaps rates are going to have to stay low to counterbalance that. Already people don't love our long end debt. Do you think a Kamala Harris brings about a absolutely pummeling of the long end because people aren't buying it and steepens out the curve immensely, drives rates higher? What do you think's the fallout from this?
You know, I want to vote. I plan on voting a third time for Donald Trump. So I want it to be that Kamala bad and Trump good. But the fact is, both candidates spend irresponsibly. Both parties spend irresponsibly. America can't fix any problem today unless it's a crisis. And so we will take this right up to the brink of the next big crash, which will scare the bejabbers out of everyone, including politicians. They will get serious. You know, I think one irresponsible party here has been the Federal Reserve, because while suddenly it cut 50 basis points.
They're enablers, right?
Since 2008, when we were in crisis, Where's the crisis now? But they go ahead and cut, but they aren't saying a word about fiscal spending policy. They're not saying a word about what is the latest, a $2 trillion deficit annually. We spend $2 trillion more than we take in, $1 trillion a year in debt interest expense, and more than we spend on defense. Where is the Fed in wagging a finger at Washington and saying, you got to cut this back? We were spending, I'm sorry to filibuster, I apologize. We were spending $4 trillion a year before COVID. COVID came in, $7 trillion. It stayed there.
Yeah, it's
once
crazy.
Government spends it, it never comes back down.
Yeah. Bobby?
I have an outline for this show, actually. So I kind of want to interview the two of you here. Okay. Actually, I never prepare for these fucking things, but this one I've actually got an outline. So my first question for both of you: candidate A is Trump, candidate B is Kamala Harris. Proposed policies, this relates to inflation. So Trump, tax cuts, deregulation, short-term stimulus effect of those, and also potential tariffs. And then candidate B, increased government spending, which I think both have, green energy initiatives, sector-specific inflation, possible broader inflationary pressures based off of giveaways. What do you guys think in terms of where each candidate stands on their inflationary impact? I think they're both inflationary.
You want to take it first, Dennis?
Yeah, go.
You want to take it first?
Sure. Okay, so inflationary impact. We forget because Kamala barely mentions it now, but she wanted to impose price controls. She'll teach those grocery store guys that have like a 1% margin,
massive
to price
inflationary
gouge. That is the worst possible policy. Now, the Trump tariffs, I helped Lou Dobbs, the wonderful late Fox and CNN anchor, write The Trump Century. And we have a chapter on those tariffs, and they did not lead to inflation in any way. They didn't even increase the price of beer in aluminum cans, but it brought China to the negotiating table for the first time ever to agree, we'll stop stealing your intellectual property. We'll start trying to be more fair. And so it's a great negotiating cudgel that Trump uses. And he never means to keep them in place on everything. And it's all big talk, and it's just negotiation. And as much as the media and the economists say this is going to ruin the economy, no, it's not, because he can lift them anytime he wants. It turns out to be this new chess piece that he's able to play.
Go ahead,
you
Jimmy.
know why I agree with Dennis 100%? The last Trump interview last week, I can't remember, maybe it was at the Chicago Economics Club, when he started saying tariffs. I love tariffs. One of my favorite words. What he said, he would never be selling it that hard unless in his own mind he viewed it as the cudgel, like you said, to bring them to the negotiating table. And he feels he has to sell it. When Bobby and I sat down with Stephen Moore over the weekend in Florida and recorded with him, he said something that's resonated with me since. He said the deregulation part of it, because in my head I was thinking deregulating the corporate sector is somewhat inflationary. He likened it as popping the top off a bottle of champagne. And I'm like, isn't that inflationary? He said, no, of course it's not inflationary, because what Donald Trump will do, and consider the energy sector, but then broaden this out to everyone else, it's a supply side solution. Encourage people to make more shit. Making more shit, taking away the regulations to doing so can, in fact, bring prices down. Now, in my mind, I'm coupling that, and this is now a 3-year time horizon, coupling that with the advances in technology we were making with AI things. And this is kind of what happened with Paul Volcker back in the 80s into the 90s. The internet was the most deflationary tool of all time. And if we are in another real surge of technology, those two things could act to control inflation. Unfortunately, that might be 3 years away. Bobby, first, do you agree with that sentiment?
I do. I really do. I honestly don't think AI is as disinflationary or deflationary as the internet was.
Nor I.
But if you combine it with quantum computing, when that happens, when AI and quantum computing are together, we might as well just stay home. Like, we won't need to work. And this is the one thing that also Stephen Moore brought up: of the 9 people we interviewed last weekend, Jimmy, all smart people, he's the only one to bring up the productivity miracle that he believes can happen under Trump. Well, so that's actually what defeats inflation with an inflationary president, is productivity.
Right. Well, I think Jim's just cut to the ultimate solution, right? Because inflation happens when a whole pile of new government money comes into a market chasing after the same old supply of goods. But if productivity goes up so that the supply of goods and services are actually going up per pound of dollar spending, then yeah, that can be anti-inflationary. I got another stat for you. Moynihan CEO of Bank of America, went on CNBC, it was last week. He said that in the last 4 years or so, the bank has eliminated 2,000 man years. So that's 2,000 employees just with AI that comes in, a program called Erica that handles 2 billion transactions now a year. Half of them used to be handled by people doing email, text, that kind of thing. And yet AI has taken it over. And so there are real savings there. And it is anti-inflationary. And I used to argue with Steve Lippin, the wonderful, very smart, seasoned Fed reporter over at CNBC. And I used to say the Federal Reserve has no way of kind of tracking the incredible increases when storage costs go down 40% a year. The Fed has no way of factoring that into the inflation rate. And so they're really kind of overestimating, although a lot of people do think the Fed vastly underestimates inflation so that we can keep government entitlement increases down.
All right, so before I take sort of a different track on the inflation thing for the two of you guys, I want to mention that our friend James Fishback from Iuorio Capital, who's actually going to be on this show next week at the same time live, he did a speech at the Institutional Interest Rate Investors Conference. I probably butchered that, but it was something like that. And in that speech, in reference to tariffs, which Dennis, you said people shouldn't fear, and Jimmy, you said is probably negotiating, right? He said, take Trump seriously, but not literally. And I thought that was a great way to phrase it because 100%, he said that it's in Trump's book to scare your opponent so they come to the table first. And that seems to be 100% like what he's doing, right?
That's what the media have been doing to Trump for years, right? They take him literally. Oh my God, he said he's going to be a dictator for a day. He's going to be a dictator. They keep taking him literally instead of taking him seriously. I love that. And I wish I'd come up with that.
Well, just give him credit. You could use it all you want. And then over time, you could just stop giving him credit.
That's what we do.
That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
So to a little twist on the inflation thing. So when we're looking at inflation as it relates to interest rates, right? We all three know that Trump put a lot of public pressure on the Fed when he was president. Now, I would throw in there that the president has a ton of influence over the Fed already because the Treasury Secretary meets with the central bank chief all the time, right? And I'm sure that they don't talk about the administration's desired policy at all when they're sitting there having coffee, right? They probably say, no, we're not supposed to talk about this, so let's not do that, right? Similar to Bill Clinton and his, attorney general in the plane talking about their kids. Trump will outwardly pressure the Fed. The Biden administration, subsequently, Vice President Harris says, no, the Fed should be independent. The Fed should be independent. So Trump is now going to come into office if he wins with about 2.8% inflation. And do you think he's going to continue to pressure the Fed to keep rates low or no? Dennis?
Absolutely, because he doesn't care about convention. And we have a chapter in the Trump Century book by Lou Dobbs that I helped him write. We have a chapter on this whole thing because, we're shocked. We're shocked he's interfering with the independence of the Fed. Did you see what Senator Thin Lizzie Warren said just a week or two ago? Oh, no, right before the Fed cut 50. Oh, yeah. I think they should cut 75. I think they're already behind the curve, blah, blah, blah. Well, why didn't the media go crazy and say, oh my gosh, she's interfering with the independence of the Fed? Presidents have always jawboned about that. Yeah. And it's just that when Trump does it, suddenly it's a national scandal. But of course, he's going to keep talking. And by the way, there's one good point Trump has made as I did a lot of research on this. So let's say our interest rates are at 3.5%. And Japan or some other country, some lesser country, Greece, are at 1% or 2%. Why should the U.S. bonds, the safest in the world, be paying a higher return, a higher interest rate than the bonds of Greece? Okay. And so why not keep interest rates, and so it's an awfully good point. I'm not sure how that relates into lower interest rates, but I think that the Fed in cutting when they did the 50 basis points, when there really is no reason, I was amazed at how well the economy did with 5% interest rates. We did okay. Nothing cratered. Banks had a problem because they had too much in what long-term instrument but we survived it.
Hold the maturity.
And they cut like that. Yeah. Do you know that they went 8 years of Obama and raised rates only once from emergency zero rates a month before the election that was going to lead to the successor of Obama. Then Trump comes in and they raise rates something like 7 times in 3 years before they had to cut like crazy because of COVID. Why? There was no sign of inflation at all. And I think the Fed's a political animal, and I think they wanted to help the Democrats win re-election.
So Jimmy, sort of the same question for you in terms of the public pressure versus anyone who's a thinking person knows there's private pressure anyway. Do you think there's any difference in that? And then the second question I have for you is, I think Kamala Harris is good for the value of people's homes because she's going to raise every single house price by $25,000 if she's actually able to give people $25,000 for a down payment. That basically just goes into the price, right, Jimmy?
No, it actually goes more than 25 into the price because buying begets buying. Oftentimes when an asset is set in motion by something as innocuous as the $25,000 given, the price could be more than that because it sets it off. We're speculators, you know what I mean? Particularly in areas that are high demand places. That is the most idiotic, asinine. Well, no, actually, it's funny is that I was going to say it's the most idiotic, asinine policy I've ever heard. It's $25,000 to home buyers when supply is the issue, not demand. But then all of a sudden you throw it into the list, taxing unrealized capital gains at 40%, jacking up the capital gains tax to 40%, increasing the corporate tax. These are all massively destructive.
The billionaire tax.
The billionaire
tax
tax.
Cost Jeffrey Bezos $22 billion in taxes this year based on how much his Amazon stake has gone up. He would have to then sell stock and pay a 40% capital gains tax.
And guess what Bobby and I would do?
Pay the
Tell him,
tax.
Bobby.
Jimmy has said in about 26 shows, Dennis, 26 straight shows. Jimmy has said, as soon as that passes, let us know when Bezos needs to pay his taxes because we're going to sell the shit out of Amazon. We're going to front run
him selling it. No doubt.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
exactly.
It would be
just a ridiculous policy.
Yeah.
And absolutely ridiculous policy. By the way, one other thing, if the reporting is right on this first-time home buyer's gift of $25,000 that instantly raises the price of homes $25,000, it doesn't go to an American who hasn't bought a home before if the American's parents have owned a home before in the U.S., from what I've read. So that means it's good for immigrants. Their parents didn't live here. Their parents didn't own a home here. So it favors immigrants. But my mom owned her home. So that means I wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, I'm going to sneak in some of the policies too, because I'm 1.6% Black African, and you better yeah. And like people, when I say it, they're like, "What are you talking about?" Like I'm treading on some sacred ground. Hear me. I will be first in line if they pass these asinine policies of reparations. Or giving Black Americans $50,000, all of which has been knocked around. I will literally be first in line. If you want to call me a hypocrite, have at it, but I'm not a hypocrite at all. I am against these policies, yet I will milk them for everything I can get. Back to the Kamala policies real quick, Dennis. Do you think that those 4 policies, I mean, we agree that they're asinine, they're destructive, it's literally economic sabotage. Do you think she has any intent of passing those or a reasonable facsimile, or will her big donors be like, no, that was just election talk. We control you now. Abandon all the shit.
But then what will the agenda be? I mean, yeah. I think they're serious about wanting to do this. I think they're quite serious about wanting to raise corporate taxes, even though economic studies since the 1960s have shown that when you cut corporate taxes, companies actually take part of that savings and put it into higher wages and higher compensation for better hiring and better retention. And when Trump cut corporate taxes in the first 3 years, wages rose, especially at the bottom level, more than they had on record, and unemployment fell. And it was great wage growth, especially for the lowest earners, because companies had more money to spend. So raising corporate taxes is terrible policy, and she wants to do that. And the capital gains is just awful. And my gosh, you think that the market would have a huge sell-off. It's just that even the Wall Street Journal, it's so sad to see this, a column in the Journal from one of their own saying that, well, you know what? We could vote for Republican House, Republican Senate, but a Democrat White House so that we'll have gridlock and make sure that they can't get anything passed. The Journal op-ed pages hate Trump so much that they almost could foresee Kamala in the White House, which is just horrifying to me.
Frank says, nice, Dennis. About time you did this. Frank, congratulations, whoever that baby is in your picture.
Oh, look at that. Cute baby Frank.
Yeah, Frank is very happy you're here, Dennis. So let me ask you guys on the sort of emphasis on tariffs at the media. And, again, that whole thing about like 7,000 Nobel economists have said that the tariffs would be bad. But what do you think about the threat of tariffs? Do you think it's one of those things where it is just a negotiating ploy? Or do you think, because he has done it, like he did it to Turkey, he did it to somebody where he said he made a threat. They played out the bluff. He put the tariffs on. They went back and changed the thing Trump wanted changed. He took the tariffs off. I really don't remember the country. I can go back and look at who it was. But do you think that it's actually one of those things where Trump will say, look, I'm going to do these tariffs. I'll do them. Don't tempt me. Because this is the place where a president can actually have a direct effect, right? In foreign policy.
It's the whole big bad wolf thing, right? And it's brandishing those tariffs. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Now, he has to be able to apply tariffs on more than just China, because when you smack them on China, China ships them to other mid shippers in other countries, and then they just come into the country. So he's got to, tariff across the board to be able to get to China. Number one. Number two, though, let's remember that it's not just a threat, because he definitely smacks those tariffs in place. And by the way, given that the Biden administration rescinded, was it 64 or 94 different measures from Trump on the border as soon as they got in, given the Biden administration rescinded $25 or $35 insulin only to restore it months later, but because it was a Trump order, the Biden administration let those Trump tariffs stay in place. Why is that if they're so terrible? There's a letter to the editor of the Wall Street Journal today from Robert Lighthizer, former trade representative during Trump, who's pro-tariffs, kind of reaming out the Journal editorial board for not getting it. And I think Lighthizer really has a good point on this.
So I'm going to answer it too, but I'm going to steal from Howard Lutnick. That's his name, who's on CNBC, right? Howard Lutnick, right? But anyway, so to put it in perspective, like tariffs, we can all go to business school, and they teach us that tariffs are bad, and that's overly simplistic but true. Now, if you all of a sudden throw in the situation we're in now, where Europe is tariffing us at a high level, tariffs that were put in after World War II to rebuild their damaged economies after the war 80 years ago. You know what I mean? So those are still legacy tariffs, which, by the way, underscores the fact that once government passes something, like you just said, about $7 trillion per year, now they're going to just keep spending it forever until we rein it in or they hit the bricks. But to get them to negotiate those away seems like a very reasonable thing to do. And if they're going to tariff us 50%, it almost seems reasonable to tariff them 50% too, and just say, okay, now we're all, now it's all net zero. Is there anything wrong with that thesis?
Isn't it absolutely stunning that Japan, which kicked the U.S.'s butt in steel and autos 30 years ago or more, Japan is kind of, it needs to tariff U.S. cars coming in because they're a weaker country. These tariffs go back to a time when the U.S. was the dominant economy in the world. It isn't anymore. It's barely number one over China. And thank goodness, great story in the Journal today. The U.S. economy is just amazingly resilient, and it continues to outpace anywhere else in the world. Some people thought that China released the Wuhan virus on purpose to derail the economic growth that was happening under Trump. I wonder how much of this, though. Sorry about that.
Where are you where are you at a city street? Where are you at with that race car?
I started this with my I'm right on a main drag, Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, above a burger joint, and my window was open, and I keep wanting to go close it, and I keep waiting for you to break away so I can run away and close it. I'm so sorry about that. I lost what I was going to think about, but you got my point. You're there with me
completely, Bobby.
We finish each other's sentences.
Of course.
Yeah, first of all, that sounded like a Ducati from the third gear throttle that I heard in there.
Oh, shut up with your motor thing.
I live right across the street from a prison, what used to be the Brooklyn detention center that they've now raised, knocked down, and so they're trying to build a new prison. I've been waiting to do a parting shot in my podcast on it because it is so easy to destroy something and tear it down. It comes down instantly. The amount of work going into just even get a foundation for this place to start building again is just so daunting. So much harder to build something back up than it is to destroy it.
Well, you listen to Kevin O'Leary or Trump, no one would ever build there or invest money in New York City again. So
right.
based on what happened. So I want to ask you both again. We saw when Trump won in 2016, there was a big stock market sell-off that was one of the great buys of the last 10 to 15 years, right? We are in a different regime, right? Because again, as I may not have mentioned in the show, correct me if I did, but I think the amazing thing Trump did in his last term was he used deregulation and trade policy and then the heavy hand of the executive branch on tax policy to extend a bull market, which is harder to do than to start one. Okay, let's just figure structurally, it's harder to take an 8-9-year-old bull market and extend it because bull markets, the average duration is about 9-10 years before about a 20-30% move lower that then resets the next bull market. So that's the thing I think he doesn't get credit for, is he took over about an 8 or 9 year bull market and extended it further. Now he's entering a bull market that, what would we say, it's 3 years old, 4 years old? It's not more than 4, right? And he's got to continue it with 2.8% inflation already in place. So what is the initial reaction of the stock market if he were to win? And what's the initial reaction of the stock market if Kamala Harris were to win? What's the initial reaction of each candidate? Yeah. Either one of you guys go first.
Jim, go ahead,
stock market reaction.
So I would say this. I would say when Donald Trump won in 2016, it was such an unbelievable curveball. The one thing that markets we know hate conclusively is confusion and chaos. And Donald Trump, for those first few hours or days, represented tremendous chaos because he was the first non-traditional politician to be voted into the highest office, I mean, possibly even ever. I don't know much about the history too, which, by the way, I'd love to, we don't have time for it today, but go into the mechanics of how he got to be where he was. I still think it's a game theory thing. 15 traditional candidates against one non-traditional in the primaries. You know, it's obvious what's going to happen. But anyway, these people are both known commodities now. Donald Trump particularly. He was president for 4 damn years. The fact that he thinks the people are going to round him up or he's going to put him on a list, and James Carville's calling for, you know, a revolution. What the hell are you people talking about? It was a calm 4 years. The only scandals, the only chaos was the chaos that the media and the left created, and 98% of it was complete bullshit. So I think the stock market will yawn regardless of who wins. I think the stock market will like it better if Donald Trump wins, because you guys said before that stock markets tend to rally after the presidential election regardless of who wins. But they rally when a Republican wins because they believe that deregulation is coming. Small business optimism tracks that. That's not just me saying it. And they rally when a Democrat wins because they think they're going to increase spending and just sprinkle money all over the infield. And I think that that's the reason. There are different reasons. One of them is much more healthy to me, but I think this is a yawn event for the stock market. Dennis?
Okay, I got to take the other side of that trade, even though you have vastly more experience in this stuff. But I was a journalist, so why would I let that stop me from taking the other side of that, right? Because you know what? There's an extra ingredient, and that is love. Donald Trump loves wealth creation, loves the markets, loves capitalism, loves business, loves entrepreneurs. And just feeling loved helps big powerful businesses move forward and invest more and take on more risk than they would before, instead of being reviled and bashed and demonized because they're not paying their fair share, as Obama did for 8 years. Obama should have had one of the best rebounds ever from one of the worst downturns since the Great Depression. Instead, Barini Associates did great work on this. His rebound was one of the worst ever. And I think it's because he kept a boot on the back of the neck of big companies. He was constantly criticizing. And America was turning from a land of opportunity into a land of envy. And if Donald Trump gets reelected again, oh my gosh, I think the markets are going to take off, at least in that first 100 days. And they're going to be so happy about this. And also, while the polls continue to say, oh my gosh, it's a dead heat. She's up one. He's up one here and there. Oh, the 7 swing states. Polymarket, the single biggest betting site with almost $2 billion in real money riding on bets, is giving Trump something more than a 20-point lead. Kamala is at 38 and Trump's at 62 or so. So my gosh, what is that saying?
Yeah. So actually, you and I are not disagreeing as much as you think we are, because I like, and by the way, the things, to you people who are watching, the things that Dennis said about love and loving the business, this is quantifiable. All you have to do is look at that small business optimism index, and it tracks the belief of what the administration thinks of them. And yes, you mentioned Barack Obama. Barack Obama with the "you didn't build that" bullshit. By the way, even if what he follows that up with, there's some truth to, and he was trying to make the point about infrastructure being important to all business. Give him that point. It's a bullshit way to say it because people want. A president should be giving a pat on the back to wealth creators. We should have a billionaires day, which, by the way,
Yes.
I don't like the fact that these billionaires have outsized political power. I'd love to be able to work that part of it out. But independent of that, we should celebrate the wealthy. Nobody ever gets a job from a poor guy. And Donald Trump is that guy. And by the way, I will mention too that in the richest counties around this country that used to be vote Republican 15 years ago now have switched heavily Democrat. There is no question. It is also quantifiable that the Democrats are the party now of the rich and the Republicans are the party of the redneck working class, whatever you want to call it. Which, by the way, I put myself in that redneck, maybe not working class, but whatever. You know what I'm saying? I'm rambling, but I'm not running for office, so I can stop now.
Right. I lost you said this first part that I wanted to really kind of take and run with, but now I've lost it.
The business optimism part, how it tracks the Republicans, was that part? Because that's important to me. Because I think
that truly is important. But damn it, I lost the thread of that. It'll come back.
If we were 35 again, we'd remember all this shit, Bobby.
No, don't even ascribe to that. It's because we have so many things crowding our head.
That's it, exactly right.
It drives me crazy. I'm just making a comment here. I don't really have a question, but the unintended consequence of politicians is exactly why I want more independent business people. Multiple successes, multiple failures, or both to be in government. And here's why. When Theodore Roosevelt broke up, what did Rockefeller own? Standard Oil, right? When he broke up Standard Oil, it was a big deal, right? It's the biggest breakup ever. Rockefeller was already one of the richest people in the world. And he created multiple different companies who created multiple different jobs and arguably advanced the technology of energy in the US because there was no longer a monopoly. But they actually took the target, Rockefeller, and made him about 3 or 4 times richer because in breaking that up, he owned stock in every single one of these companies and they were all valued higher simultaneously. So he became 3 to 4 times richer. It is very difficult to impossible to have a functioning economy that lifts all boats without having these couple of people at the top who use the same roads as everybody else. Like when Obama says something like, you didn't build those roads. Well, everybody has access to those roads. It's not like they built the roads for you and now you owe them. They built the roads for everybody. By the way, the roads and bridges are the biggest bunch of bullshit.
Right. They built the roads for everybody. Only a couple of guys invented big, huge companies, right? I mean,
only a couple of guys able to figure out how to use those roads, right, to be able to build big.
I mean, here's the thing: Bezos worth 140 billion, roughly, okay, or 160 billion. And my gosh, no one should ever be allowed to be worth that much. But he invented a company that lets us get a $200 big screen TV set in a day, delivered free of charge. And a company that has created more than $1 trillion in wealth held by other people. I'm willing to give him 140 billion to create over $1 trillion in wealth held by other investors. And we forget that. And instead we demonize billionaires for being billionaires. When also, I did some work on this and the Rockefeller guy from way back when in 1900 or whatever did, he was vastly richer than any of these billionaires today. He had 60%, I think it was, of all America's wealth. Whereas you look at the class of billionaires, and do you know that in 2000, Fidelity had something like, I think it was 440,000 millionaire accounts, IRAs with $1 million. In 2020, it was more than 4 million. So the wealth creation people keep worrying about, it's not just at the billionaires. I mean, it's filtering down. It'll get down there, especially if we can lift up the bottom by giving them more opportunity instead of taxing the top and handing it through government programs. These are real figures. We've given over $1 trillion, I think it was, or 16 trillion since 1964. It's probably up to about $20 trillion now. And if you look at children in poverty, in 1964, when we started the war on poverty, 23% of kids. Now, after that big $2 trillion handout post-COVID, 15%. So that's not enough to move the needle enough. We need enterprise zones in the poorest zip codes the way Trump wanted to do, and the media never covered it. But it was a great idea, and it did lead to some development. But I'd love to see what Trump would do in his one-term run when he doesn't have to worry about getting reelected.
So you mentioned that Rockefeller had 50-60% of the country's wealth at one point in time, which is amazing and staggering. Now I've often made the argument that just purely look at this holistically. Let's say you make $200,000 a year right now. Your wealth can only be measured by what it can buy. And what can your $200,000 a year salary buy compared to what Rockefeller could buy with his 60% of the country's wealth? You can buy entertainment in your hand. You can buy air-conditioned cars. You can buy absolute heating and cooling systems, medicine. Back in that days, the president of the United States, I can't remember who it was, son stubbed his toe in the yard, an infection started, and he died because there was no penicillin at the same time of Rockefeller. So my argument is that if you make $200,000 right now, there is an argument to be made that you are more wealthy than Rockefeller because you can buy more comforts, more entertainment, more communication, more medicine. What do you think about that?
Well, I do think that it's true that the so-called poor today are vastly better off than middle class or even almost upper class people in countries have been for centuries. I mean, most people who live at the poverty line today, they have HD TV, flat screens, they have air conditioning, they have all the comforts of home. They have, I think I read a stat a few years ago, an average about $35,000 a year in various government assistance. So, I mean, I think there's been a lot that's been done for the poor. It's just that a lot of that is by handouts. And also when a television that used to sell for $1,000, I've got this Sony big kind of screen, 46 inches, paid $1,000 for it in 2002 when I was moving out of my marriage. And this, I'm going to spend $1,000 on this in $20,002. And today that HD TV would sell for like $200. So that benefits the poor as well.
Sure.
Incredible advances. Instead of it having to be this negative story, there is more we could do. I feel like incentivize building in the poorest zip codes, give extra tax breaks for hiring and training unemployed people in the neighborhood who will come to work there, and accelerated depreciation, et cetera, to get more things going on there. And you can give them a job. I don't think the poor people want to receive entitlements. I think they want a way to get a stake in life and build something for themselves.
I keep thinking the Democratic Party, if they wanted a woman of color to beat Trump, should have picked Tulsi Gabbard before she switched sides today, which is really good to see. Yeah, exactly. Condi Rice. But, this whole thing, anyway, I do have one more question. Do either one of you guys, and I'll go to Jim first, so that because I'm kind of springing this on you, Dennis. Do either one of you guys think that there are sector-specific benefits? I'll throw out energy for Trump. I'll throw out anything in ESG or green energy for Kamala Harris. Do either one of you see any sector specific? It can be commodities, it can be individual stock sectors with each candidate. Jimmy?
Yeah.
So in 2020, when Joe Biden won the presidential election, I immediately bought oil companies. I believed that their negative opinion on crude oil would drive the price up. They discourage new fracking, they discouraged, and crude went with $43 a barrel when he got in office, up to when he won the election, up to $130 a barrel.
Part of that was the invasion of Ukraine, which I would argue also was because of the Biden election.
Right. Okay. So my trade worked pretty damn well because of that. I think a similar thing would happen. I think that a Harris win. And again, she's talking now about fracking, but at the same time, there's hurdles to entry and the regulations are sky high. But she's saying she loves fracking now. She's saying a lot of things. She's saying she loves mining too. Wait till the environmental wing of their party gets a hold of her, and you want to talk about a cudgel? She's going to get metaphorically beaten with that. I think Kamala Harris is good for oil because she's bad for oil exploration. I think she's good for copper. And any conductors, it's not platinum and palladium because they don't want combustion engines. They just want copper and maybe silver. I think Donald Trump may be a little bit bad for those two commodities, but I think Donald Trump is better for the Russell because if he puts all these tariffs in place, or at least threatens to, the bigger companies manufacture crap ton internationally where the smaller companies do not. It could benefit from that. So I think Donald Trump probably gives a good boost to the Russell. Dennis, you got any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. What he said, since you guys are more expert, but I was thinking instantly, Like I recently bought UNG for natural gas as an ancillary play, an externality of AI. The AI chip demand and the electricity that burns are just massive and huge. And it turns out most of the electrical grid is switched over to nat gas. So I think nat gas good demand for nat gas because of AI. Nukes are the same reason and a way to invest in that, especially small nuclear. Okay.
I did. I bought it. A uranium play. Yeah.
Okay. Energy stocks generally, if Trump wins, if Commie wins, and I do mean Commie, defense stocks, because she will get us into a war and defense stocks will go up, right? But also, I think either way, banks, the biggest banks, because interest rates will be coming down even more.
On the front end or across the curve? Yeah. On the front end, Dennis, or across the whole curve?
Front end, they'll come down for sure. Yeah. And that's even, I'll fill in that answer.
On the front end, I think the Fed's going to cut.
Yeah, the Fed's going to cut. Short end rate's going to go. And even if what you're implying, Bobby, which is what I think too, is I think long end rates could go higher because of inflationary concerns. Banks like that even more, a steep yield curve. They borrow short and they lend long, call it a day.
So the long rates go higher, right? Because the demand for those long bonds goes down. Exactly. And that price going down sends the interest rate up, right? And the reason the price went down is because I don't want to tie up my money for longer. If I think the Fed's going to be cutting, I do want to tie up my money for longer.
If you think the government's going to be spending and issuing a shit ton more of those bonds, it's a supply thing. There'll be a ton more
bonds are hitting the market, right?
Yes.
Can you guys explain for me, please? Sure. I saw this debt markets, and then I saw just in the last 4 weeks or something, this huge spike just straight up vertically in total debt refinancing or something. Did you see that chart?
I did. And I was starting, Bobby, you might have some, because I read about this too. And there was something about a reporting period. So that there's a reporting period that the government has to cop to all their expenses. And once we got past the day of that reporting period, there was an additional $500 billion that hit the deficit. Did you see that, Bobby? Do you have any idea what we're talking about or no? Because I can't feel it any more than that. But I do know what you're talking about. But
it worried me.
Yeah. Oh, it should work. With the whole thing should worry you. Which, by the way, I could, for you and for anyone watching, I know you can tell when the shit is beginning to hit the fan. Every day, have a chart up, a live chart of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. But when SVB went under back in March, a year and a half ago, March, SVB opened that window, started buying bonds again. Their balance sheet went higher. If the Fed starts buying bonds again, it means that the shit is beginning to hit the fan. That is the time you really want to be long gold, Bitcoin, things like that. Do you understand what I mean by that? Because it'll mean that the Fed is coming back in and either quietly or overtly buying bonds from the Treasury again, which is the ultimate Ponzi scheme. Yeah.
I have another question for you guys. Another chart. And by the way, I get this stuff from X. I think it's an amazing platform for media news, but also for financial stuff and market stuff. Did you see a chart going back from before 2008 and 2000 and looking at unrealized losses at the banks? Okay, and you get over to the past few years and you see these huge below zero unrealized losses, massive. And the commentary on it is saying not since 2007, right before the big 08 financial crash, have we seen such a spike up at unrealized losses. Did you see those charts at all? And how worried should we be?
I saw those, and I'm not terribly worried about those, although I may be in the minority, simply because I think that's part of the reason the Fed is going to cut rates, because those unrealized losses, a lot of that is in their hold to maturity portfolios. So if the rates come down, all of a sudden they sort of capitalize on, some of those unrealized losses go away.
Of course, it's paper, shift paper.
Yeah, but are we going to have the mark-to-market problem that we had that set off the last meltdown? Was it that meltdown in 08, mark-to-market driven?
Yeah, but with the marks, consider 08 before, because we were talking about an asset that's highly illiquid, right? Real estate. But not only are we talking about the leverage that had been built up in it, the leverage that had worked its way down to mom and pop leverage, the thing in the Big Short where the stripper owning 5 or 6 homes, that was all real shit, okay? And that's not going on right now. So we are talking about banks who are possibly holding bad debt. I think the Fed is going to ride in to the rescue and save them like they're doing now. I think that's the biggest reason they're easing when GDP is 2.8, when retail sales is going up, not down. Which, by the way, I will say a lot of that's government spending and a lot of that is rich people. The top 20% still have money. But I do not put – again, I wrote a Substack on this, Dennis, which I'm sure you read. I'm sure you wait every week for my Substack to come out. But about how – You look at real estate, you look at the stock market, you look at gold. Have these things really rallied 40 to 50% over the last 3.5 years? No, the dollar is just worth 70% of what it was worth before then. My point is that you can't have bubbles if it's just a function of the dollar goes down, so all the ISI prices are going up. Speculative fervor has to build up, and it has to be weak hands that own this shit. And these banks might go under. I think they want some banks to go under, quite honestly. But
Why?
I think the top
Yellen definitely does.
because remember, there used to be, I might be getting these numbers wrong, but like 25 years ago, there was 15,000 banks in this country. Now there's about 4,000. Okay, I think they would love to have 15 banks because they're easier to control. I think if you read Carol Roth's book, The War on Small Business, I think there's a very, very compelling argument to be made that the government wants centralization within different corporate sectors so then they can drop the fist down anytime they want. That's why all the chain restaurants enforced mask mandates and vaccine mandates, and the mom and pops like my restaurant, the day I would ask somebody to show me medical records to eat at my restaurant, I don't care if they would have led me away in cuffs. I was never going to ask someone ever to show me their vaccine passport.
Can I throw in, Jimmy, you as a restaurant owner, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime.
Ooh,
right?
Can I answer the tips one?
Yeah, and let me ask you the question because I know where
Sure.
this is going. But you look at it and you say, okay, there was a labor shortage that was a big part of the spike in inflation, right? If you have no tax on tips, there are states, Florida's one of them, where restaurant workers actually get paid a normal wage and then their tips are theirs, right? Some states don't enforce that. I don't remember what Illinois does. I've been gone from that bankrupt state for 4 years now. What would happen in your restaurant and how hard would it be to get people to work overtime? It's part of the reason that the unions are asking for shorter work weeks. It's not so they could work less. It's so that the work hours they work now get charged as overtime. This sort of takes care of their current overtime where you can keep the same sort of labor going.
So I love both policies, mostly because I want the government to have net less money. Like I genuinely believe that our debts and deficit are related to having too much receipts, not too little. Here's the part I hate about the no tax on tips. What is the last bastion of cash? Is the service industry, the underground tip world. People tip in cash. I think if we eliminate taxes on tips, we eliminate the need for cash, and that's one step closer to the dreaded central bank digital currency as we start to wean our economy from cash. So that's the only thing I don't like about it. I still would vote for it because I like the fact that it is a tax cut, which I'd never look at a tax cut that I don't like. But I want Dennis, what do you think about that thesis? Do you think it has any credibility?
Break the tie here, Dennis.
Ruined whatever I have to say because that was just so interesting. The extra layers you took that chest-wise. The idea that you would no longer tip in cash to help them hide it from the tax, and that your tip would be instead electronic. And oh my gosh, it's another way of going after cash. What I lament about this, I mean, I love the idea, but what I lament about it is it will set up an entire gaming of the system so that now a plumber will come and will no longer charge $120 an hour. They will charge $5 an hour and pay tax on that. And then, but the suggested tip is $115 per hour, and they'll be able to shelter that. So the entire system will just get utterly perverted to overly take advantage of this very kind of honorable thing aimed at service people.
Right.
The other thing, though, is tipping's out of control. I shouldn't have to tip my grocery store person for ringing up groceries that are overpriced. Okay. And yet, sure enough, they expect a tip. I shouldn't have to tip 18% on a cup of coffee when, this waitress spent an hour waiting on the table for the same 18%. And so if taxes are suddenly tax-free, if tips are tax-free, I want tips to go down to 10%.
I bet it will too. I've heard other people say that. Yeah. Maybe you're right. Yeah.
But the pressure is on us so much, against it that I don't think it'll come back. So it might be even inflationary, although it really is.
Anyway, Dennis, tell people clearly where they can find you, because people, you need to find Dennis. I know a lot of you are on here because you already found Dennis.
And I want you to watch out for the leadership genius of Elon Musk, the future bestseller coming out from HarperCollins in January, 11 Lessons of Elon. What would Elon do? It will change your life. Meanwhile, check out my podcast, What's Bugging Me, on Ricochet, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. And it's basically media, politics, some personal improvement as well. And a lot of business and guys like this coming on. And I appreciate talking to you. And I'd love to love to talk to you some more and bring you on. What's bugging
and
me?
we're going to
There's a
sell
lot
the shit
to
out of your
us.
book too when it comes
As
out.
soon as
We're
your
good
book
at
comes
selling
out,
books.
we'll have you on again.
Dennis the Copy will have you on too.
People can learn from these lessons. I really think that there's things that we can do in our own lives to live larger, to love more out loud, to work harder and strive, bigger. I mean, Elon is doing things that are truly amazing, and yet I've never seen a guy getting beaten up so much by so many people, except Trump.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
both-
Well,
they're-
Dennis, I like to give this inspirational message as we close off, and you just stole all my fire. I hope you're happy. No,
There you go.
Dennis said the word appreciation, so I will just build on that. We appreciate you guys watching so much. None of this works without you and your support. The DMs, the retweets, the feedback we get, the questions on this show. We are humbled by the support. Remember what Bobby and I's mission is, and to a certain extent, Dennis as well, too. We are both refugees of legacy media. We were there the whole 25 years I spent there. You were at the whim of overzealous producers. You were at the whim of sponsors. You couldn't say this. You couldn't say that. We want to create and build platforms that you can say whatever you want. You might not agree with our opinions and think they're bullshit, but you cannot agree with you cannot disagree with the transparency part of it. They are our honest to God opinions. My motive is to grind legacy media into the dust over time, because independent small journalism, the only thing that works. This is the Trader's Edge. I'm Jim Iuorio. That's Bob Iaccino. That's our good friend, Dennis Kneale.
You know how the financial world goes. Here comes the buzzkill. Please make sure to take some time to read this boring disclaimer. We will owe you one.